The jungle doesn't warn you when you're alone.
It lets you notice. I wasn't being hunted. I was being watched. Predators don't chase. So I stayed still. Movement became permission. Trust isn't safety.
What if your only chance to escape the deadliest jungle on Earth wasn't through human ingenuity, but through an impossible friendship with a jaguar? We're talking about a lone botanist, completely cut off, who had to do the unthinkable, earn the trust of one of the Amazon's most fearsome hunters. How did this unprecedented interspecies bond form? And more importantly, how did it save a life? I call him Dad, but the other people call him Dr. Aris Dorn. The men on the boat called him that before they left us here. They started the motor and the boat went away down the brown water. It got smaller and smaller until it was gone. Now it is just us. Dad says this place is the Amazon. He says it is full of secrets waiting for him to find them. He looks at the wall of trees and he smiles like he is looking at a big pile of candy. But I don't see candy. I only see green. It is a dark, angry green. The trees are not like the ones at the park. These trees are monsters. They are taller than the apartment building where we live. They are taller than the apartment building where we live. Their roots are like big snakes tangling up on the ground, trying to trip me. I pulled on the strap of my backpack. It felt heavy. The air here is wrong. It feels heavy too. It feels wet, like someone threw a warm, soggy blanket over my head and told me to breathe through it. I tried to take a deep breath, but the air tasted like dirt and old water. My shirt was already sticking to my back. My hair was wet on my forehead. Dad started walking. He didn't look back to see if I was coming. He just walked into the green. "Come on, Leo," he said. His voice sounded small. The trees ate the sound of his voice. I ran a little bit to catch up. The ground was soft and mushy. It made a squishing noise when I stepped.
The mud tried to grab my sneakers. I looked down and saw a bug with too many legs crawling over a root. It was red and black. I wanted to step on it, but I was scared it might bite me. Everything here looks like it wants to bite. Dad stopped at a big bush. He took out his notebook and his glass jars. The jars clinked together in his bag. He put his face very close to a flower that looked like a melted candle. He was writing things down fast. He looked happy. "This is it, Leo," he whispered. I looked around. The green went on forever. There was no sky. The leaves were so thick they blocked the sun. It was like being in a room with the lights turned down low. I felt very small. I felt like an ant on a sidewalk. I said. He didn't answer. He was looking at the flower. A bird screamed somewhere high up. It didn't sound like a happy bird. It sounded like it was hurt. I said again, louder. "Not yet," he said, but he wasn't looking at me. My stomach hurt. I didn't want to go deeper. I wanted to see a street lamp. I wanted to hear a car horn. Here, there are only noises I don't know. Buzzing, clicking, rustling. The jungle is loud, but it is a scary kind of loud. It sounds like thousands of things are watching us, waiting for us to make a mistake. Dad stood up and pointed his finger into the shadows. "That way," he said. I looked where he was pointing. It was just more trees, more vines, more dark places where monsters could hide. The green is everywhere. It has no end. I gripped the straps of my bag until my fingers turned white.
I am 10 years old, and I know when a place is bad. This place is bad. But Dad started walking again, and I couldn't stay alone, so I followed him into the dark. Everything changed when the sky turned off the sun. 1 minute I was watching a blue butterfly land on my sneaker. It was pretty. Then the clouds rolled in fast. They weren't white clouds like the ones in the park. They were the color of a bruise. The air got very still. It felt like the jungle was holding its breath before screaming. The birds stopped making noise. Even the bugs stopped buzzing. Then the water fell. It didn't start slow like it does at home when I walk to school. It fell all at once. The drops were huge. They hit my head and shoulders hard. It felt like people were throwing rocks at me from the trees. I put my hands over my head to protect myself, but it didn't help. The water was everywhere. It filled my eyes and my nose. I couldn't see Dad anymore, even though he was right next to me. "Dad!" yelled Dad. His voice sounded weird. It sounded like he was underwater. Then I heard the roar. It wasn't the rain. It was something bigger. It sounded like a freight train coming right at us, but I knew there were no trains here. The ground shook under my feet. "Dad!" screamed Dad. He grabbed my arm. His fingers dug into my skin. It hurt bad, but he didn't let go. He pulled me so hard my feet left the ground. We ran away from the riverbank. The ground wasn't dirt anymore. It was soup. My feet slid everywhere. I fell on my knees.
The mud tasted like pennies and rotten leaves. Dad yanked me up. He was crying, or maybe it was just the rain on his face. I had never seen Dad look scared before. That made my stomach turn into ice. I looked back. The river wasn't a river anymore. It was a wall. A giant brown wall of angry water was smashing through the trees. It snapped the big trees like they were dry twigs. I saw our yellow tent. It looked like a small toy. The water swallowed it in 1 second. I saw the blue plastic box with our crackers and peanut butter. The water took that too. Then I saw the black box, Dad's special radio. He said it was our only way to talk to the world. It bobbed on the brown water for a second, spinning around, and then it went under. "Dad!" shouted. He dragged me toward a high rock. It was slippery and covered in green moss. We scrambled up. My fingernails broke on the stone. My knees were bleeding, but the rain washed the blood away fast. We huddled on top of the rock. It was the only dry place left. The water was right below us now. It was churning and foaming. It looked like brown milk boiling in a pot. It carried big logs and pieces of the forest. I was shaking. My teeth made a clicking sound I couldn't stop. My clothes were heavy and cold. They stuck to my skin like wet paper. I hugged my knees to my chest. The noise was so loud, it filled up my whole head. There was no room for thinking. There was only the roar of the water and the sting of the rain. Dad put his arm around me, but he was shivering too.
His arm felt hard and tense. He didn't say everything was going to be okay. He didn't say we were safe. He just stared at the angry water, destroying everything we had. I closed my eyes tight. I squeezed them until I saw spots. I tried to pretend I was in my room. I tried to imagine my warm quilt and the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling. I tried to smell pancakes, but the jungle was too loud. The water was too close. I just wanted the noise to stop. I wanted to go home. The loud water went away, but it didn't leave us alone. It left silence behind. The quiet was heavy. It felt heavier than the rain. The sun tried to come back out, but it wasn't warm. It just made the steam rise up from the mud. The whole world smelled like wet dog and old basement. We climbed down from the rock. My shoes made sucking noises in the mud. I didn't like that sound. It sounded like the ground was trying to eat my feet. Dad stopped near a tree that had fallen over. He looked very tall, but his shoulders were slumped down. He started patting his pants. He checked every pocket. He checked his short pocket. He checked the pockets on the sides of his legs. He did it fast, like he was looking for keys he lost in the couch cushions at home. I watched his hands. They were shaking a little bit. He pulled out his silver knife. It was the one he used to cut apples for me. He opened it and looked at the blade. It was shiny, but it looked very small. The jungle was so big. The knife looked like a toy. He put it back. Then he pulled out the lighter. It was the orange one.
He tried to make a fire come out. His thumb pushed the little wheel. It made a scraping sound. A tiny spark jumped, but there was no fire. He did it again. Scrape, spark, nothing. He did it 5 times. His thumb turned white because he was pushing so hard. Then he threw the lighter on the ground. He didn't pick it up. I whispered. My voice sounded tiny. He looked at me. His glasses were crooked on his face. There was a crack in the glass on the left side. It looked like a spider web made of silver lines. It made his eye look broken. It made him look like a stranger, not my dad. He pulled out the compass. It was the round thing on a string that tells us where to go. He held it flat in his hand. He stared at it for a long time. Then he shook it. He shook it hard. He hit it against the palm of his other hand. It made a dull smacking sound. He hit it again and again. His face got red. He bared his teeth like a dog does before it barks. I took a step back. I was afraid of the jungle. But right then, I was afraid of Dad. He saw me step back. He stopped hitting the compass. He put it in his pocket. He took a deep breath that sounded shaky. "It's okay, buddy," he said. He was lying. I knew the look. It was the same look he had when he told me Grandma went to sleep for a long time. His mouth was smiling, but his eyes were not smiling. His eyes were moving too fast. They darted left and right, looking at the bushes, looking at the sky, looking at the mud. They looked like flies trapped in a jar. I put my hand on my stomach. It hurt.
It felt hollow, like a balloon with no air in it. I thought about the peanut butter in the blue box. The water took it. I thought about the granola bars. The water took them too. We had nothing. I looked around at the forest. Before the rain, the trees were just trees. They stayed where they were. But now, they looked different. They looked taller. Their branches looked like long, skinny arms reaching out. The leaves blocked the sky. It felt like the trees were stepping closer to us. They were closing in. They wanted to squeeze us until we popped. "Come on," Dad said. He grabbed my hand. His hand was cold and wet. I didn't want to move. I wanted to stay on the rock. But the trees were leaning over me, and the silence was too loud, so I let him pull me into the dark shadows. My legs felt like they were made of heavy stones. Every step was hard work. The mud didn't want to let me go. It grabbed my sneakers and held on tight, pulling them down deep. I had to yank my foot up every time just to take another step. My socks were wet inside my shoes. It felt squishy and gross, like stepping on a slug over and over again. We walked for a very long time. I tried to look for the sun, but the leaves were too thick. They made a ceiling that blocked out the light. It felt like being in a room with the curtains drawn, but the room was the size of the whole world. "Dad, I'm thirsty," I said. My throat felt scratchy, like I had swallowed sand. "Just a little further, buddy," he said. He didn't look back at me. He was staring at the ground, trying to find a trail. But there were no trails.
There were only vines that tried to trip us and big roots that looked like sleeping snakes. I saw something bright on a big green leaf. It was a bug. It was bright red, the color of a fire truck. It had long black legs and huge antennas. It looked pretty, but also mean. I reached out my finger to see if it was soft. "Dad!" yelled. His voice was sharp. It made me jump. I pulled my hand back fast. The bug turned its head and looked at me. It didn't look scared. It looked like it owned the leaf. "Don't touch anything," Dad said. He sounded angry, but I knew he was just scared. We kept walking. The trees all looked the same. They all had gray bark and moss hanging off them like old beards. I started to feel dizzy. I felt like we were walking in a dream where you run but don't go anywhere. Then Dad stopped. He stopped so fast I almost bumped into his back. He was staring at the ground. There was a patch of mud that was extra sloppy. In the middle of the mud there was a footprint. It was a small footprint. It had the zigzag lines of my sneakers. Next to it was a big footprint. "No," Dad whispered. He kicked the tree next to him. His boot hit the wood with a hard, hollow sound. A piece of bark flew off and hit the ground. He kicked it again. He yelled a bad word. It was the word he told me never to say, the one that makes Mom mad. He yelled it so loud that birds flew out of the branches above us. My lips started to shake. I couldn't stop it. The tears felt hot on my cheeks. "We're lost," I said. Dad turned around. His face was red and sweaty. He saw me crying and his shoulders dropped.
He got down on his knees in the mud and pulled me into a hug. He squeezed me too tight. He didn't smell like my dad anymore. He smelled sour. He smelled like the way a dog smells when thunder is coming. He smelled like fear. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. The light started to go away. It didn't happen slow like at home. At home, the sun takes a long time to say goodnight. Here, the dark just fell on us. It was like someone turned off a light switch in the sky. The gray shadows turned into black shapes. The spaces between the trees got darker and darker until I couldn't see what was hiding in them. The air got cold, and the noises of the day stopped. New noises started, clicking sounds, rustling sounds. The jungle was waking up, and we were small, and we were alone in the circle we made in the mud. The dark was not empty. It was full of things I could not see. At home, night is quiet. You might hear the refrigerator hum, or a car drive by outside. Here, the night screamed. It sounded like a million whistles blowing at the same time. The noise was so loud it made my teeth hurt. It came from everywhere, from the dirt, from the trees, and from the air right in front of my face. We were sitting under a leaf that was bigger than a beach umbrella. It was wide and green and droopy. It was the only roof we had. The ground was wet and cold, and the dampness soaked right through the seat of my jeans. My skin felt clammy, like I had a fever, but I was shivering. I sat very close to Dad. Our shoulders were touching. He was shivering too, but he tried to hide it. He kept rubbing his hands up and down his arms to make heat. "Dad," I whispered.
My stomach felt like it was twisting into hard knots. It made a long, low, gurgling sound. I pressed my hands against my belly to make it hush. I thought about the box of crackers in the pantry at home. I thought about the apple I didn't eat at lunch 3 days ago. I wanted them so bad it made my mouth water. "Shh," Dad said. He didn't look at me. He was listening. Then the screaming stopped. It didn't fade away slowly. It just cut off. 1 second, the air was full of buzzing and clicking. And the next second, it was dead quiet. It felt like someone had unplugged the world. The silence was worse than the noise. It was heavy. It pressed against my ears. It felt like the jungle was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I didn't want to look out from under our big leaf, but I couldn't help it. I looked into the wall of black bushes in front of us. It was so dark I couldn't see the trunks of the trees anymore. It was just a solid wall of night. But then I saw 2 spots of light. They were yellow. They were the color of old lemons. They were floating in the darkness, just a little bit higher than my head. They were perfect circles. I blinked, waiting for them to go away. I thought maybe they were fireflies, but fireflies flash on and off. These lights stayed on. They were steady. They were cold. They were eyes. They were wide apart, wider than a person's eyes. They didn't move. They were just staring right at us. They looked hungry. I squeezed Dad's hand so hard my knuckles hurt. I felt his whole body freezed. His muscles got hard as rocks under his wet shirt. He stopped breathing. The air got stuck in his chest. I knew he saw them too. The yellow circles didn't blink. The beast was watching us, and it knew exactly where we were. The sun finally came back. It didn't make things happy. It just made everything bright and hot. The gray light turned into a burning white that hurt my eyes when I tried to look up. The yellow eyes from the dark were gone, and for a second I thought we were okay. I thought the monsters had gone to sleep because it was morning. I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like they were filled with sand. They were heavy and asleep. When I moved, pins and needles poked my skin from the inside. Dad stood up first. He looked terrible. His face was gray and covered in scratch marks, and his eyes were red. He looked at the bushes where the yellow lights had been. "Stay close," he said. His voice sounded like it had broken glass in it. Then the green wall of leaves moved. It wasn't the wind. The wind moves the tops of the trees. This was heavy. Something was pushing the branches aside near the ground. A paw came out first. It was huge. It was wide and flat and covered in gold fur. Then the rest of it stepped out. It was a cat, but it wasn't like the cats that live in houses and sleep on porches. It was a giant. It was bigger than the biggest dog I ever saw. Its fur was gold and shiny like a new coin, and it was covered in spots. The spots looked like black flowers painted on its back. It was beautiful, but looking at it made my stomach drop like I was falling from a high tree.
It moved so smoothly. It didn't bounce or trot. It flowed. Its shoulders rolled up and down with every step. It looked like its muscles were made of water moving under a fancy rug. Dad shoved me. He didn't mean to hurt me, but he pushed me hard. I stumbled back and hit a tree trunk. "Get behind me," Dad said. He didn't whisper this time. He sounded like he was choking. I peeked around Dad's leg.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out his folding knife. I knew that knife. He used it to cut apples for me. He used it to open boxes from the mail. It was a dad tool, but now, holding it up against the giant cat, it looked like a toy. It looked like a toothpick. Dad's hand was shaking. It was shaking so bad that the silver blade was vibrating. I had never seen my dad shake before. He was the one who opened jar lids. He was the one who carried me when I was tired. Seeing his hand tremble was scarier than the cat. It meant he knew he couldn't stop this. The cat didn't make a sound. It didn't roar. It didn't hiss. It just stopped and stood there. Its tail twitched at the very end, just a little flick. It looked at Dad, and then it looked at me. Its eyes were green now, not yellow. They looked smart. That was the worst part. A shark just bites you because it's hungry. A bear attacks you because it's mad. But this cat looked like it was thinking. It was doing a math problem in its head, and we were the numbers. I stopped breathing. I held my breath until my chest hurt. The cat took one step closer.
I could see its whiskers. They were long and white. I could see the heavy muscles in its jaw. It knew we didn't belong here. It knew we were soft and slow. It looked at Dad's shaking knife, and it didn't look scared at all. We turned into statues. That is a game I used to play at recess. You have to freeze when the person who is it turns around. If you move, you lose. But if I moved now, I wouldn't just lose. I would be gone. My feet were stuck to the ground. It felt like roots were growing out of my sneakers and going deep into the dirt. But my knees didn't want to be statues. They wanted to shake. They were knocking together, and I had to lock my legs straight to make them stop. It hurt. My muscles felt tight, like rubber bands pulled until they are ready to snap. The giant cat took another step. It walked in a circle around us. It was slow. It wasn't in a hurry at all. It knew we couldn't run fast enough. It was checking us out, like Mom checks melons at the grocery store to see which one is good. The air changed when it got close. I could smell it. It didn't smell like a pat. It smelled heavy and thick. It smelled like wet dirt and old fur that has been left out in the rain too long. It smelled like something sour, like dried blood. The smell made my nose sting. Dad was a rock in front of me. He didn't breathe. I could see the sweat on the back of his neck. It was rolling down his skin in big drops. His shirt was stuck to his back. I wanted to grab his hand, but I was afraid that if I moved my arm, the cat would jump.
The knife in Dad's hand was still shaking, but he held it up high. The little silver blade caught a piece of sunlight. It looked so small against the big gold animal. The cat stopped right beside Dad. It was so close I could have reached out and touched the black spots on its side. I saw its ribs move when it took a breath. It let out a puff of air from its nose. The air hit Dad's leg. The fur on the cat's shoulder twitched. I closed my eyes. I squeezed them shut as hard as I could. I saw bright colors behind my eyelids because I was squeezing so hard. I waited for the roar. I waited for the sharp teeth to hurt me. I tried to think about my room. I tried to think about my Lego set and the blue rug on my floor. I didn't want to see it happen. I held my breath until my lungs felt like they were burning. 1 second passed, then 10 seconds. Nothing happened. I heard a soft crunch. Then another one. It was the sound of heavy paws pressing into dry leaves. The sound was moving away from us. I opened one eye, just a tiny bit. The giant cat wasn't right next to us anymore. It had walked over to a big pine tree with rough bark. It didn't run away into the forest. It didn't leave us alone. It sat down. It curled its big tail around its paws, just like my cat does when she sits on the windowsill. It looked comfortable. It licked one of its paws. Then it looked back at us, its green eyes locked onto Dad. It was just sitting there, watching. It was waiting for us to try to move.
It was guarding us, like a dragon guarding a pile of gold. Except we were the gold, and it wanted to keep us right there until it was hungry again. The sun came up and went down 2 times. That is 48 hours. I learned that in math class, but out here it felt like 100 years had gone by. The worst part wasn't the scary noises in the bushes anymore. It was my stomach. At first, it growled like a dog. Then it stopped making noise and just started to hurt. It felt like I had swallowed a handful of gravel from the driveway. Every time I took a step, the sharp rocks inside me rubbed together. It was a twisting pain, like someone was wringing out a wet towel inside my belly. I tried to drink water from the leaves, but it didn't help.
The water just sloshed around in the empty space and made me feel sick. Dad wasn't Dad anymore. He looked like a balloon that had lost all its air. His face was gray, the color of old newspaper. He was walking in front of me, holding a stick, but he was wobbling. Then his knees just gave up. He sat down hard in the dirt. He didn't check for bugs or thorns. He just collapsed. "Dad," I whispered. He didn't answer. He leaned his head back against a tree trunk. His eyes were open, but they looked glassy. They looked like marbles that lost their shine. I touched his arm. It was cold, even though the air was hot and sticky. This scared me more than the monsters. If Dad couldn't walk, who would carry me? Who would know which way to go? I sat next to him and pulled my knees to my chest. I felt tears coming, but I didn't have enough water left in my body to cry. Then the bushes moved. It wasn't the wind.
The gold and black spots came out of the shadows. The giant cat was back. I stopped breathing. I grabbed Dad's sturdy shirt, but the cat didn't look angry. It walked low to the ground. Its mouth was full. It was holding something big and furry. It looked like a giant rat, the kind that lives in the sewer in cartoons, but bigger than a cat. The animal was dead. Its head swung back and forth while the spotted cat walked. The cat stopped a few feet away from us. It looked at Dad. Then it opened its jaws and dropped the dead thing. It made a heavy, wet thud on the ground. The cat didn't attack. It turned around and walked to a flat rock. It sat down and started cleaning its face with its paw, just like it had finished dinner. It was watching us. It was sharing. Dad blinked. He looked at the dead animal. Then he looked at the cat. He moved slowly. His hand shook as he pulled out his pocket knife. He crawled over to the dead thing. "Come here," Dad said. His voice sounded like it was full of sand. I didn't want to go closer. The dead animal looked gross. Its eyes were open and staring at nothing. Dad used the knife. He cut into the meat. It made a wet, squishy sound. There was no fire to cook it. We didn't have matches. Dad cut a small piece of red meat. It was dripping. He put it in his mouth and chewed. He made a face like he was eating bad medicine. Then he cut another piece and held it out to me. "Eat," he said. I shook my head. "Eat," he said again. He looked scary when he said it. His eyes were desperate. I took the slippery piece of meat. It felt cold and slimy on my fingers. I put it in my mouth. I tried not to let it touch my tongue, but I couldn't help it. It tasted like when you bite your lip and it bleeds. It tasted like old pennies and salt. It was warm and thick. I gagged. My throat tried to push it back up. "Swallow," Dad whispered. I forced it down. It slid down my throat like a slug. I ate another piece, and another. The sharp rocks in my tummy stopped hurting. The food hit my stomach and my body grabbed it. I looked at the cat. It was still watching us. Its green eyes were bright. It knew we were eating. It wanted us to stay alive. That was almost scarier than if it wanted to eat us. It was keeping us as pets. The raw meat stopped the twisting in my stomach, but it didn't fix Dad. After we ate, he didn't stand up. He didn't look for a path. He just sat there against the tree, breathing fast and shallow. I looked at his neck. There was a bump there. It was angry and red, with a white center like a tiny volcano. Maybe a mosquito bit him. Maybe a spider came down on a web while we were walking. I didn't see it happen, but I could see the poison working now. His skin turned into fire. When I touched his forehead, I pulled my hand back because it was so hot. It felt like touching the hood of the car after a long drive in the summer. He was sweating, but he was shivering. His teeth were clicking together. It sounded like someone dropping marbles on a tile floor over and over again. "Gad," I said. He opened his eyes, but he didn't look at me. He looked past me, at the thick green leaves. "Linda, turn down the heat," he mumbled. My heart stopped. Linda is my mom. She wasn't here. She was at home, probably crying and talking to policemen. Dad thought we were in our living room. "Dad, it's me," I said. I grabbed his hand. It was wet and shaking. "Mom isn't here." He frowned. He looked right at my face, but he didn't see me. "Did you finish your math homework, Mrs.?" I started to cry. I couldn't help it. I didn't have homework. I didn't have a pencil. I had dirt under my fingernails and blood on my shirt. The world was scary enough with the monsters and the dark, but this was worse.
Dad was right next to me, but his brain had gone away. He had left me all alone. He kept muttering about the thermostat and the car keys. I curled up in a ball. I was the parent now. I was the one who knew where we were. That was a heavy thing to carry. The sun went down. The dark poured in like black water. It covered the trees and the ground. The air got cold, but Dad was still burning. He finally stopped talking and fell into a sleep that looked painful. He twitched and groaned. Then the leaves rustled. The spotted cat came back. I saw the green eyes first. They were low to the ground. I held my breath. I thought maybe he wanted the meat back. I thought maybe he was still hungry. He didn't make a sound when he walked.
He was a ghost with fur. He walked right up to us. He was so big. His shoulder was as high as my chest. He smelled like musk and old rain. He circled around Dad's feet. I froze. I thought he was going to bite Dad's leg. But he didn't bite. He lay down. He curled his long tail around his nose and rested his chin on his paws. He was guarding us. I looked at the cat, then at the dark trees. The trees were full of things I couldn't see. The cat was right here. He was dangerous, but he was warm. I moved an inch, then another inch. I reached out my hand. My fingers were trembling. I touched the fur on his back. It wasn't soft like a kitten. It was coarse and oily. But underneath, he was solid. He let out a long breath. His ribs expanded against my hand. Then I felt a rumble. It started deep inside his chest. It vibrated through his skin and into my fingers. He was purring. It was a low, heavy sound, like a large engine idling in a driveway. "Mr. Spots," I whispered. He swiveled one ear toward me, but he didn't look up. He stayed there. Dad was burning with fever, tossing his head in the dirt. But the giant cat was a steady, heavy wall against the night. I kept my hand on his fur. As long as I could feel him breathing, I knew the other monsters wouldn't come close. Dad woke up begging for a drink. His lips were peeling. They looked like the old chipping paint on our garden fence back home.
He tried to lick them, but his tongue was white and dry. It made a scraping sound, like sandpaper rubbing on wood. He sounded weak, like a battery that was about to die. "Water," he whispered. I looked at our water bottle. It was empty. It had been empty since yesterday. I knew I had to leave the tree. I had to go to the river. I didn't want to go. The river was where the ground disappeared, and the dark water hid things. But Dad's face was gray. He needed me. I was the parent now. I found a leaf as big as a dinner plate. It was thick and waxy. I held it with 2 hands like a fragile bowl. I walked away from the safety of the tree roots. The further I went, the softer the ground got. The dirt turned into mud. It was black and sticky. It grabbed my sneakers. Every time I took a step, the mud made a sucking noise, trying to pull my shoes off. It felt like the earth was trying to eat me feet first. The air got thicker here too. It smelled like wet socks and fish that had been left in the sun too long. I reached the edge of the water. The river was wide and ugly. It looked like chocolate milk, but thick like soup. I couldn't see the bottom. I couldn't even see an inch down. I crouched. My knees sank into the wet slime on the bank. I reached out with my green leaf cup. The water was cold against my fingers. I tried to scoop it up gently so I wouldn't get dirt in Dad's drink. That was when I saw the log. It was floating about 5 feet away from my hand. It was gray and knobby, like the bark of an old oak tree. It was drifting toward me.
I stared at it. Something was wrong. The river was flowing to the right, but the log was moving to the left. Logs don't swim. Then the log blinked. A yellow eye opened on the side of the wood. It had a black line down the middle. It looked right at me. It wasn't wood. It was skin. It was a lizard, but bigger than any lizard in the world. It was a dinosaur. I tried to stand up. I tried to run, but the mud held my feet tight. I was stuck. The log monster moved fast. It surged forward. The water rippled away from its nose. It opened its mouth. Inside it was pink and white. I saw teeth, rows and rows of them.
They looked like jagged pieces of broken glass. I couldn't scream. My throat closed up. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the bite. I waited for the pain. But the bite didn't come. Instead, there was a noise louder than a cannonball hitting a swimming pool. Something heavy slammed into the water right in front of me. I opened my eyes. A blur of gold and black spots was on top of the dinosaur. It was Mr. Spots. He didn't roar. He just bit down. He clamped his jaws onto the back of the monster's rocky neck. The water exploded. They rolled over and over. Mud flew into my face. The dinosaur thrashed. Its long tail whipped around and slapped the water, soaking my shirt. It hissed like a tire losing air. Mr. Spots held on. His claws dug into the monster's skin. The brown water started to turn red. It looked like someone was mixing red paint into the mud. The monster realized it couldn't win. It twisted hard, splashing water high into the air, and pulled itself free. It dove deep. The red swirl followed it down into the dark. Mr. Spots stood in the shallow water. He was chest deep. His fur was spiked and wet, sticking to his heavy muscles. He breathed hard. He shook himself, and water flew off him like rain. He turned his big head and looked at me. His green eyes weren't angry. They were calm. He waited for me to pull my feet out of the mud. He saved me. The river had teeth, but I had a guardian. I ran back to the tree roots where Dad was hiding. My hands were shaking so bad that the water in the big leaf cup almost spilled. I had to walk slow, even though I wanted to run. I wanted to be away from the river and the red mud. Dad was still on the ground. He looked like a pile of old clothes that someone forgot. I knelt down and put the leaf against his cracked lips. "Drink," I said. He drank fast. Water ran down his chin and made clean lines through the dirt on his face. He coughed, and his whole body rattled. It sounded like something was loose inside his chest. "We have to go," I told him. I pulled his arm. "We can't stay here." Dad tried to stand up. He was heavy. He leaned on me, and I almost fell over. I am small, and Dad's big. Usually he picks me up. Now he felt like a bag of wet sand on my shoulders. His skin was burning hot, like he had been sleeping in an oven. Dad whispered.
His eyes were foggy. He wasn't really seeing me. I pointed at the trees. Mr. Spots was standing in the shadows. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was standing tall on a flat rock, watching us. His fur was still wet and spiked from the river. Dad saw the big cat. He stiffened. I felt his muscles get tight. He tried to pull me back, but he was too weak. He swayed like a tree in a storm. "No," Dad said. "It was just a breath of air." "He saved me," I said. I didn't know if that was true, but the woods were too big and I didn't have a map. Mr. Spots was the only thing that wasn't trying to eat us. The cat turned around. He didn't run. He walked slow. He knew we were slow. We started to walk. It was hard. The ground wasn't flat like the sidewalk at home. It was full of roots that stuck up like bony fingers. I tripped a lot. Every time I tripped, Dad stumbled too. Mr. Spots stayed ahead. He was a ghost. He moved through the bushes without making a sound. He didn't break a single twig, but we were loud. We crashed and crunched. Every time we stopped to breathe, the cat stopped too. He would sit down and wrap his tail around his paws. He looked at us with his big yellow eyes. They didn't blink. If we took too long, he let out a noise. It wasn't a roar. It was a low huff like a heavy sigh. It vibrated in my chest. He was telling us to hurry up. I focused on his tail. It was long and had a white tip. As he walked, it flicked back and forth.
Left, right, left, right. It looked like the metronome on my piano teacher's desk. It was the only thing keeping me moving. The forest changed. The trees grew closer together, blocking out the sky. It got darker. Then came the thorns. They were everywhere. Long vines with spikes as big as my thumb hung from the branches. They looked like barbed wire fences. Mr. Spots slipped under them easily. He was liquid, but we were solid. A thorn caught my shirt. It scratched my shoulder. It felt like a bee sting. Another one grabbed Dad's pants and ripped the fabric. We had to push through. The scratches burned, but I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. If I cried, I wouldn't be able to see the tail. "Keep walking, Dad," I said. My voice sounded tiny in the big woods. Dad didn't answer. He just kept his feet moving, dragging his boots through the mud. We were following a killer beast into the dark. and we didn't have a choice. We were the mice, and he was the king. The sky stopped being blue. It turned a color I didn't like. It looked like a bruise, all purple and black and angry. The air got heavy. It felt thick, like I was trying to breathe underwater. The leaves on the trees flipped over and showed their pale bellies. They were scared of what was coming. Then the noise started. It wasn't just a sound. It was a shake. The ground jumped under my sneakers. It felt like a giant was stomping on the roof of the world. I covered my ears, but the shaking went right through my hands and into my skull.
Down, Dad mumbled. He fell more than he sat. We were next to a tree that was wider than a car. Its roots didn't go into the ground. They stood up like the legs of a giant spider, making a dark cage underneath. It was a hole, but it looked like a mouth. The rain hit us. It didn't fall soft. It fell hard. It felt like people were throwing pebbles at my head. It hurt. "Get in," I yelled, but I couldn't hear my own voice. The sky was screaming too loud. I shoved Dad between the wooden spider legs. He rolled in onto the dirt. I crawled in after him. It was a tight squeeze. The roots twisted over our heads like a messy wooden ceiling. It smelled like wet dirt and old mushrooms in there. It was dark, but it was dry. I sat with my knees pulled up to my chin. My clothes were soaked. The water on my skin felt like ice. I started to shake. I couldn't stop. My teeth were clicking together so fast it made my jaw hurt. I hugged myself, but my arms were cold too. Dad was asleep, or passed out. He wasn't moving. He couldn't keep me warm. Then the light from the outside got blocked. A shadow covered the entrance to our root cave. I stopped breathing. I pressed my back against the hard wood of the tree. Mr. Spots crawled in. He was too big for the hole. He had to flatten his body and drag his belly across the dirt. He squeezed inside with us. Now the hole was full. Dad was on the left. I was in the middle. The beast was on the right. I squeezed my eyes shut.
I waited for the teeth. I waited for the pain. I thought he trapped us in here to eat us because we couldn't run away. But nothing bit me. I felt something heavy press against my side. It was hot. It was hotter than the heater vent in my living room in the winter. The heat soaked through my wet jeans. I opened one eye. Mr. Spots was lying down. His head was on his paws. He was licking the water off his chest. He didn't look at me. He just wanted to be out of the rain, too. I was still shaking. My shivering was making my whole body jump. The cat felt the jumping. He stopped licking. He looked at me with those yellow lantern eyes. He shifted closer. His fur touched my arm. It was bristly and wet on top, but underneath, it was burning with life. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The cold was hurting me, and he was the only warm thing in the world. I slowly uncurled my hand. My fingers were white and numb. I reached out and touched his side. I buried my fingers in the black and orange spots. He let out a breath. Then the vibration started. It wasn't a growl. It was a hum. It felt like a car engine idling. The sound traveled from his chest, through my hand, and into my own ribs. He was purring. It was a deep, rumbling sound that drowned out the angry sky outside. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He smelled like river water and wild animal, but he didn't smell like a monster anymore. He was just a big, warm thing in the dark.
I closed my eyes and let the motor in his chest rattle my bones until I stopped shaking. The sun came back, but it wasn't friendly. It was a hot, white eye staring down at us. It watched us walk for a long time. I don't know how many days it was. Counting is hard when you are just trying to keep moving. My sneakers gave up before I did. The blue one broke first. The bottom part peeled off like a banana skin. Every time I lifted my foot, the sole flapped against the dirt. I tried to walk funny to keep it on, but I tripped over a root and scraped my knee. Dad tried to tie the shoe together with a long piece of grass, but the grass snapped. It was too dry, so I took them off. The ground was mean. It wasn't like the soft grass in my backyard. The forest floor was covered in sharp things. There were little rocks that felt like Lego bricks, and dry sticks that poked my skin. My feet started to look ugly. They were covered in dirt and cuts. The bottoms of my feet turned hard and yellow, but they still hurt. Every step was a sting. I wanted to stop. I wanted to sit down and never get up again. But Mr. Spots kept walking, so we had to follow. Mr. Spots looked different now. He wasn't big and puffy like before. He looked like a rug draped over a fence. His sides were caved in. When he walked, I could see his bones moving under his fur. They looked like sticks sliding around in a sack. He was hungry. I knew he was hungry because my stomach felt like a twisted wet towel, and his probably felt the same. But he didn't look at us like we were dinner.
He walked in front of us. He walked slow, his heavy paws making no noise on the dead leaves. He was the leader. Dad held my hand, and we walked behind the big tail. We came to a spot where the trees grew too close together. The shadows were thick there. It looked like nighttime in the middle of the day. There was a smell coming from the dark place. It smelled like rotten meat and wet dog. Mr. Spot stopped. He froze. He stood so still he looked like a statue in a museum. The hair on the back of his neck stood up straight. He made a noise. It wasn't a roar. It was a low rumble in his throat, like a car engine that is having trouble starting. He stared at the dark trees. He bared his teeth, but not at me. He was showing his teeth to the darkness. Then he turned around. He bumped his head against Dad's leg. He pushed us away from the dark trees. "We go around," Dad whispered. His voice sounded like it had sand in it. We walked a big circle around the bad smell. I don't know what was in there. Maybe it was another beast. Maybe it was a monster. I didn't want to know. I just watched the orange and black spots moving in front of me and tried to step where he stepped. Later, we stopped near a puddle to drink. The water was brown and tasted like mud, but it was wet. Mr. Spots didn't drink. He sat on a flat rock and watched the woods. His ears were twisting around, listening to things I couldn't hear. Dad looked at the cat. Then he looked at me. Dad's face was dirty, and he had a new scratch on his cheek. His glasses were crooked. He started to cry. It wasn't the loud crying. It was the quiet kind where the tears just leak out and wash the dirt away. "This isn't science," Dad said.
He wiped his nose with his dirty sleeve. He looked at the giant cat like he was seeing a ghost. Predators don't do this. They don't protect. I touched Dad's arm, and I asked. Dad shook his head, but he was smiling a little bit, even though he was crying. "I don't know, buddy." I looked at Mr. Spots. He yawned. His mouth was pink and full of sharp white knives. He didn't look like an angel. He looked like a killer, but he was our killer. I felt small and soft and easy to break, but walking behind him made me feel a little bit stronger. The world was full of teeth, but the biggest teeth were on our side. The trees stopped being walls. They just ended. It happened so fast I almost fell over. 1 second we were pushing through vines that grabbed at our ankles, and the next second there was nothing but bright, hot light. The sun hit me in the face like a heavy hand. I had to close my eyes tight and wait for the red spots to go away. When I opened them, I saw the world was cut in half. The green forest was behind us, and in front of us was the water. It was a river, but it was too big to just a river. It looked like a moving road made of brown soup. It was wide and flat and looked very heavy. The water didn't make splashing noises. It just slid past the dirt, dragging giant logs and piles of foam like they weighed nothing. It smelled like mud and dead fish. It smelled like the end of the world. Mr. Spots stopped. He didn't step onto the sand. His big front paws stayed on the last patch of grass. He lowered his head until his chin was almost touching the dirt. His ears went flat against his skull. He looked at the open space like it was on fire.
He knew he didn't belong there. The open space was for people. The dark woods were for him. I looked out at the brown water. There was a speck of color. It was blue. It was the bright, fake blue of a plastic toy or my bedroom wall back home. It was a boat. My heart hammered against my ribs like a bird trapped in a box. I tried to yell. I opened my mouth, but my throat was full of dust. My voice was just a dry squeak. It sounded like a mouse. I coughed and tried again, but nothing came out. I felt tears hot on my cheeks. I was too small to make a sound. Dad saw it too. He didn't try to yell. He grabbed the hem of his shirt. It was ripped and gray with dirt. He pulled it over his head. His skin was red and covered in bug bites. He started waving the shirt in circles. He jumped up and down. He looked crazy. He looked like he was fighting invisible bees. "Hey! Hey!" Dad screamed. His voice cracked. The blue thing moved. It turned. The white foam behind it made a curve in the brown water. The sound of a motor drifted over the water. It was a low hum, getting louder. It didn't sound like a growl. It sounded like a machine. I saw tiny people in the boat. They were standing up. They were pointing. I felt a cold twist in my stomach. I stopped looking at the rescue. I turned around. Mr. Spots was still there. He was half in the shadow of the trees and half in the sunlight. The sun made his orange fur burn like fire, but his back legs were hidden in the dark. He wasn't looking at the boat.
He was looking at me. His gold eyes were wide. He didn't blink. He didn't show his teeth. He just watched. He looked lonely. He looked like a king standing at the gate of a castle he couldn't leave. The boat crunched onto the sand behind me. Men were shouting. They had loud voices and heavy boots. They sounded scary. I reached my hand out toward the trees. Mr. Spots twitched his ear. He turned his massive head away. Without a sound, he slipped backward. The leaves swallowed him up. The shadows took him back. The beast who watched me was gone. The men didn't walk like Dad walked. They stomped. They had heavy black boots that smashed the wet sand. There were 3 of them. They looked like giants. They wore clothes that looked like fake leaves, green and brown and gray. They had black metal things strapped to their chests. I knew what they were. They were guns. They looked heavy and cold. The men didn't look happy. They looked angry and fast. One of the giants ran to me. I flinched. I thought he was going to hit me. I closed my eyes and waited for the pain. I wanted to curl into a ball, but he didn't hit me. He grabbed my shoulders. His hands were huge. They felt like sandpaper. He squeezed me so hard it hurt. He was yelling something, but his words were too fast. They sounded like barking dogs. He shoved a plastic bottle at my face. The plastic scraped my lip. "Drink," he said. The water was deep and scratchy. The water wasn't brown like the river. It was clear. It was freezing cold. It hit my empty stomach like a heavy stone. I drank until I choked. The water spilled down my chin and made my dirty shirt wet. It tasted like plastic and medicine. Dad wasn't standing anymore. He had fallen into the mud. He wasn't moving his legs. He was just shaking. He sounded like he was laughing and crying at the same time. It was a scary sound. It sounded like something inside him had finally broken. 2 of the men picked him up like he was a bag of groceries. They dragged him toward the blue boat. His feet left lines in the sand. I didn't want to go yet. I pulled away from the giant's hand. I pointed at the dark line of trees. "Wait," I said. The man looked where I pointed. He lifted his black gun. He pointed the metal barrel at the forest. "Don't shoot," I tried to yell. "Don't shoot." The man didn't listen. He looked through the trees with hard, mean eyes. But the trees were empty. The shadows were just shadows. The wind blew the branches, and they waved goodbye. There was no orange fur. There were no gold eyes. Mr. Spots was smarter than the men. He knew how to hide. They put me in the boat. The floor was metal and hot from the sun. It burned my legs. The motor started again. It was a terrible noise. It shook my bones and made my teeth buzz. The air smelled like bad smoke and gasoline. It made me dizzy. We started to move. The water turned white and angry behind us.
The shore got farther away. The trees turned back into a green wall. It looked like a painted picture. It didn't look real anymore. It was just a long line of green. I stared at the forest until my eyes burned. The jungle is a monster. It has teeth made of thorns and a stomach made of mud. It eats people, but the monster has a heart too. I met the heart. He had big paws and soft ears. I will never see the yellow eyes again. I know that, but I will remember them when I close my eyes at night. The beast watched me. He kept me safe. And now, somewhere in the dark green leaves, he was watching me leave.